Welcome to the first in a series of what I'm calling the story of X. So, as you all know, we are working on how to solve for an unknown variable when we are dealing with two different terms. And so, I wanted to record a video to remind you guys of the different lessons that we're learning in 7th grade math. So, once again, welcome to the story of X. So, before we get started, I thought we could do like a little interesting thing. As you can see, there's something underneath these three columns of paper, which I've entitled the story of X. And what I wanted you to kind of recognize is that when we are trying to solve for X, it has a lot to do with uncovering, or what we say in math, undoing of the things around the X so that we can discover what it is. So, just a quick little activity. Don't know if you can tell what this is if I remove this sheet of paper. Nope, we're not there. Okay, I'll give you a hint. No, maybe not, because I feel like the hint will make it too easy. Okay, another one. Okay, now you're thinking, all right, this kind of looks like it could be a tomato, something, but you know, Halloween is right around the corner, so this X is hiding a picture of a jack-o'-lantern. I wanted to start off with this activity because I want us to remember again about this whole idea of using inverse operations to undo the different things that are happening around X so that we can discover what X is. So once again, remember that this is solving linear equations can be put more in sort of simple terms, creating a story of X and then solving it. So let's go ahead and look at a set of numbers. So with some of you, I've worked with tiles to represent different terms. Now, if this were an expression, so meaning if I had like 2x plus 4 plus 8, then you would know that this is what? Simplifying an expression, right? We've spent several weeks working on simplifying expressions. And what we would say is, 2x, which I put in a different color, is a different term from 4 and 8. But because 4 and 8 are like terms, we can combine them. And in this case, we would add them together and we would get a simplified form of 2x plus 12, right? And we've become really good at doing that. Today, we're kind of taking that concept idea and we're sort of building upon it. And this time what we're going to do is we're actually going to we're going to take these terms, like terms, but what's going to happen is we're going to create what we call a linear equation. And for those of you who might remember from our sort of vocabulary from our class, is that an expression is one where you have like different terms and you could be doing, applying different operations. You could be adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, but there's no equal sign. But an equation is one where we do have that equal sign, right? And one of the things that I want you guys to really always remember is that, when we're younger in elementary school, we kind of get into this idea that this is the problem and then the right side is the solution. But one of the things I want you guys to start thinking about when we look at that equal sign as you're getting older and as you're getting into more advanced math is to always think of that equal sign as a statement that means that something is true. That means whatever is this side is the same as whatever's on this side. So we could even switch it around, and I'll play with this a little bit. We could even switch it around so that we could write it like this, okay? But let's just go back to our original equation. The point I'm trying to make is, again, that equal sign is saying that whatever is on this side, whatever expression or quantities on this side, must be the same as this side. So basically what we're saying is this statement is true. So whenever we have the equal sign, we're saying this statement is true. Now, the whole point of linear equations and solving linear equations, or algebra in this case, is to solve for that unknown x. Remember, x is just a common letter that we use to stand for the unknown quantity. And I'll just write it here. Unknown quantity or value, right? And and of course, X could be any letter. And, sometimes we practice writing A, B, C, any other letters, just to remind you that the unknown doesn't always have to be X, but it is the most common used letter or variable. So we're just going to stick with that for now. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what is that X and how do we get there? Well, I started off the lessons of today's lesson with the uncovering or the unveiling and the undoing and removing of that paper so that we could figure out what picture it was underneath all of that, right? So today we're going to talk about how we're going to build that story of X. All right, and undo the story of X, I should say. Okay, so the first step we have to figure out is it currently in the most simplified form? Oops, simplified form. Yes, it is, so we don't have to do anything with that. Well, step 2. What we want to look at now is we have to build what we call the story of X. So what we want to, so we're going to build a story. I'm having trouble spelling today. Build a story. And when we build a story of X, we're going to build up. Okay, so hopefully you guys can all see this. And so let's begin then. So the story of X is that first, what's happening to the X? It's being multiplied by 2. So I'll just make that sign here. The next, we are adding 4 to that story. Okay? All right, so now that we built the story, we're going to now build another story, but this time we're going to undo it. And I'm going to say undo here. Okay? And we're going to say that undo, remember, is to apply the inverse operation or the opposite operation of whatever is happening in the building of the story back. So the opposite of 4 is subtracting 4, adding 4, sorry. The opposite of multiplying 2 is dividing by 2. All right. So now we've kind of hit that first step of simplified form, and then we've hit the second step where we're building the story of X, and then we're undoing it. And now we're going to go back up here, and we're going to apply this undo here. And we're going to go, remember, we're building up, and then we're working our way down to undo. So the reason why I put these in different colors is I want us to see something, and it's not something that you have to focus a lot on right now, but as you get prepared for 8th grade math, it's really important for us to just be thinking about like terms and unlike terms and not forgetting about that, okay? So we said that that what's happening to X first is that it's being multiplied, but remember, we want to undo by what? We want to undo by taking away something. So I'm going to rewrite our equation here. So I'm going to split it up like this because I want us to write the steps on the left and then solve on the right. So we said it is in the most simplified form, right? 2x plus 4 equals 8. Well, we want to take away 4 from this side because remember, we're trying to uncover things so that we can figure out what x is. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And I did this because I want you to see that 4 and 8 are like terms, so we can do that, right? So we can subtract 4 from both sides. And the reason why we're doing that is because, remember, what we're trying to do is we're trying to isolate that x. We're trying to undo everything around x so that we can figure out what x is. So we subtract 4 from both sides, and 4 minus 4 is 0. And we don't have to write that down because 0 is nothing, right? So what we want to do is now draw this line down here, okay? And we want to keep it balanced. Whatever we do to this side, we have to do to this side. And that equal sign demands it, because the other thing about the equal sign, I want you to think about, is that it's kind of like a scale, right? That right now, what we started off with was that this is true. So if we're going to take something away from here and we want it to remain true, it means that we have to take that same thing away from here and take it away from here, right? So I'm just going to leave that up there so I can just kind of illustrate. So anyway, 8 and -4, or 8 minus 4, is like terms, so we can combine them. So in this case, 8 plus -4, or 8 minus 4, is 4. And remember, we can't leave this 2x behind, because we didn't do anything to 2x. So now we got to bring this 2x down. Okay? So we got to bring it down. And so now this equal sign still holds true, because remember, we did something to this side and we did it to this side. So it was kind of off balance, but now it's back in balance again. Now let's go back to our undoing of our of what's happening. So we said the inverse operation, the opposite, is 2. Well, what we're left with here is 2 times x. Remember, 2x is one variable, but we can also separate 2 and x. And what we can do is we can divide both sides by 2, right? And notice, guys, a lot of times I've seen people do this and make a little division sign. I want you guys to, if you can, to try and get out of that space and instead create a fraction. Because remember, when we have that fraction bar there, it's the same thing as saying that this numerator, right, top quantity, is being divided by the denominator, or whatever's below that fraction bar, okay? So remember, we don't want x to equal nothing, right? Because we want x to be left on this side so we can figure out what x is. And so what we do is we take that same number 2 and divide it by itself, because whenever we divide a number by itself, we get 1. So we're going to just cross that out, because we could put 1x, but that's an extra step that we just don't need, because basically when we have x here, we're just saying that we have 1 of the x, right? Well, now let's look over on this side. What's 4? 4 divided by 2 is 2. So what are we saying x is equal to in order to make this original statement true? We're saying that x must equal 2. Well, here's the beauty about algebra, is that we can check our answers. So what we can do is we can go back to our original equation. I'm going to write check here, all right? And we can substitute. We're saying x is the same as 2, so we can substitute that, do this, and see if this statement turns out to be true. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. We know that. 4 plus 4. And so 4 plus 4 is 8, and 8 does equal 8. All right. So I hope that little mini lesson was helpful for you when you forget about the steps of how to solve for x. Again, just remember, you want to, step 1, figure out if it's in the most simplified form, if your equation is in the most simplified form. If it is, then you move on to step 2, where you build the story of x going up, and then you undo it by going down. And whatever you do to one side of the equation, remember, you must do it to the other side, because we want to keep that balance. We want to make sure mathematically we're saying that one side is true to the other. All right, guys, hope that helped.